open this meeting of the Tiverton Town Council with a salute to the flag.
And pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilor Leonard. Councilor Costa.
Here.
Councilor Holland.
Here.
Councilor Durfee. Here. Councilor Ruda. Present. Councilor Roderick.
Present.
Councilor Lambert.
Present.
All present.
Tonight's consent agenda consists of the approval of the minutes of the May 26, 2009 regular council meeting, approval of the executive session minutes from May 26 council meeting, receipt of the minutes from the following boards and commissions: the Arts Council, Wastewater Management 2, and Prevention Coalition. Correspondence received and filed, received from City of Newport regarding consolidation of the Newport County Convention and Visitors Bureau with the East Bay Tourism Council. Received from Paul Hill, Chairman, Villages of Mount Hope Bay Executive Committee regarding tax assessments for Village at Mount Hope Bay. Copied to Tax Assessor, Town Administrator, Town Solicitor. Petition by National Grid for grid pole on Connecticut Street. Response from DPW Director Steve Bellucci. Petition for joint push brace pole to be attached to pole 31 on Borden Road. Response from DPW Director Bellucci. Tiverton Yacht Club, Ken Tremblay, Esquire, request amendment to zoning ordinance, referred to Planning Board.
Excuse me. I had asked to be heard on that briefly. I wrote a letter to your council.
We'll take you up in a minute.
Thank you.
Are there any items anyone wishes to?
Yes. I'd like to take off item 4, number 3. And that is a letter from Mr. Paul Hill representing...
3B.
3B. Yep.
Yeah.
3B.
Okay,
And Mr.
Or
President,
3B.
okay.
Mr. President, I'd like to pull off item 4, 4.4, and actually 4A4 and 4A5, the two petitions for polls, one from National Grid and one from Verizon.
And we have a request to, for an individual to be heard on Tiverton Yacht Club, request the zoning change. The motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda. So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, we move to item 3B, which is the letter from Mr. Paul Hill.
The reason why I removed it is really to address a question to the town solicitor. And I don't know whether or not you have had an opportunity, Mr. Tights, to review this letter, but in review of the bond issue, whether it reaches a threshold of disclosure, since it is a threat of litigation that will at least suggest that it would affect the tax structure and the assessments. So I don't expect an answer tonight, but I think it's something that, as the town makes representations, that there is no material change in its financial statements, I think perhaps that does need some attention. So I will just move that the town... Pardon me?
Refer that to the town solicitor?
Absolutely. And since we're moving toward a closing, it needs very prompt attention.
There's a motion to refer item A3B to the town solicitor. Seconded. Seconded. Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Mr. Leonard?
There are two petitions, one from National Grid and one from Verizon to install poles and/or support equipment for poles. In both cases, our Department of DPW has stated they have no objections to these. So So my thought was that perhaps we could just go ahead and approve these and dispose of the paperwork now, if there were no objections. And I would so make a motion that we approve the two petitions, one from National Grid and the other from Verizon, pending meeting all legal obligations.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carries unanimous. The Tiverton Yacht Club request an amendment to zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. I'll be brief. This is a defective application
Excuse me.
in about 5 or 6...
Could you
Oh, I'm sorry.
identify yourself?
David Campbell. I live at 76 Riverside Drive. I'm the abutter on the north side of the Tiverton Yacht Club. And the reason I wanted to be heard before the automatic referral was to point out that there are numerous defects with this application, and we had this same situation at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. We chased 3 defective applications over 5 months and 6 separate hearings. 3 here, 3 at the planning board. And this application is as defective as the ones in 2008 were. And I've written a letter. I've got 7 copies. I've spoken to Attorney Tights. I tried to reach him today to go over some of these issues so that we would not have an automatic referral to the town planning board and then have it go back and forth between the town planning board and the town council. I've also spoken to Mr. Ruggiero, and he can confirm or deny this, but it's his position that a clean, conforming application should go from the town council to the planning board, and the planning board should not have to get involved with vetting the application and confirming that it conforms, especially in this case where we do have some very obvious deficiencies.
Mr. Tights?
I did receive a fax from Mr. Campbell fairly late this afternoon at 3:20, just as I was headed out the door. So I only had a chance to take a quick scan of it. I understand his concerns. I really don't think it matters. The statute says that when someone files a zoning amendment, the town council shall refer it to the planning board. There's also a time period, but that's a discretionary rather than a mandatory time period. There's no automatic approval if it doesn't happen in the time period. So if you want to refer it, I don't see a problem if you want to refer it to me to review, that's fine, or if you want to refer it to the planning board and to me at the same time, I don't think it really matters one way or the other. I did try to reach actually Mr. Ruggiero, but we traded phone calls. He was in a meeting when I called, and I was in a meeting when he called, so. But I don't think there'll be a problem with that either way.
Anybody from the council?
I would make a motion that we simultaneously refer the request both to our solicitor and to the planning board.
You have a motion?
I just had a question. Andy, just following up on what you just said, the simultaneous review, if that is the ultimate decision, if you were to find that Mr. Campbell is right, does it come back to the council?
No, if Mr. Campbell is right, it gets rejected as an incomplete application.
Forthwith?
Yes, and the planning board would be so directed, and the applicant would be directed with, these are the errors in your application, you need to fix them.
Thank you.
But, other than a copy to the council, I don't think it needs a council action unless you particularly want it to have one.
I'm satisfied with your answer. I'll second the motion.
It's a motion to refer it to the planning board and the solicitor.
Mr. President, we've already made a motion, I believe, to refer it to the planning board. I think the proper motion would be to also to refer it also to the town solicitor.
That's what I did. to do
Okay. Oh,
I think it accomplishes the same thing, Hannibal, whether we do it as one motion or two.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I intend to vote against the forwarding of a copy to the solicitor at this point in time. I would prefer that the planning board do its job, just as the council is doing by referring it to them. So I'm prohibited from doing that if the motion is going to contain the phrase planning board and the solicitor.
From a procedural standpoint, to make sure that we all have our say, I'll withdraw my motion. And I will make a new motion to refer it to the planning board as step one.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to send the requested amendment to the zoning ordinance to the planning board. Been seconded further to the planning board.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries.
Then I will also make a separate motion to also send the request to the town solicitor for review, for completeness.
And a review of whether it's a defective application. And I think that ultimately that will save time for everybody, if it is. If it isn't, we'll go forward. If it is, then we should expedite it one way or the other. So, yes, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to refer the zoning request, ordinance, change the amendment to the zoning ordinance to the town solicitor. It's been duly seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention. Motion carries 601. Thank you.
Mr. President, would you like the
Yes.
copies?
Moving on to appointments and resignations, Town Clerk requests Councilor Jay Lane be appointed to work with Town Solicitor and Town Clerk on ordinance revision.
I'll make a motion that Mr. Lambert be appointed to that excellent post.
And I will second that.
I'm not careful, I'm gonna end up with a full-time job. I can see it, Coach.
We have a
This is
motion.
the landfill.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Have you accepted this? Or?
No, I can, it's fine, it's fine.
Okay.
Let me twist that.
Carries. Okay, moving on to public hearing advertised for singing out against Hunger. Jane Brito, 2325 Main Road, request noise ordinance variance for September 18th, 19th, 20th, 2009, between 12 p.m. and 9 p.m. for the fundraiser Singing Out Against Hunger.
Is it possible for us to do this together since it's the same fundraiser, or do you want to take them separately?
We might vote on them separately, but it'd be moving along.
So, Mr. President, I guess if you also take coastal roasters, I guess that's what you're asking.
I think that's what Coastal Roasters is here. But the public hearing is now open on the matter of noise ordinance variances. Anyone from the public wishing to be heard? Anyone from the public wishing to be heard? Anyone from the public wishing to be heard? Seeing there is no input from the public, I'll close the public hearing and open it up to the council. Anyone have any questions?
I have a comment, Mr. President. To the best of my knowledge, this is an affair that's been handled for several years now, and I don't know of any major problems with their activity in this regard. Therefore, I would make a motion that we approve questions 1 and 2. That is to say, public hearing 1 and public hearing number 2, if we're ready for that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and seconded to grant the variance, the noise ordinance variance for the fundraiser Singing Out Against Hunger on September 18th, 19th, and 20th between 12 and 9 p.m. At, the first one, I guess, is at Evelyn's, and the Coastal Roasters is between 12 and 4 on the same dates, at 9 to 1. So there's different times, but that's what the, does your motion encompass all of those times and dates?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President, I would ask that we inquire of the chief of police if he's aware of any problems in past years.
Members of the council, in the past, there's been no problems whatsoever.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tiverton Power Incorporated, Attorney Richard Sherman, proposed amendment to town zoning map.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah. Before you begin, I just want to put on the record the fact that I did receive communication from Attorney Lassard representing an abutter of the property, Douglas Industries, asserting that they had not received notice in a timely fashion for this. I did check with the town clerk and looked at the post office records to confirm that the notice that was sent was mailed, which is all that the statute requires, that it be sent 14 days ahead of time. They actually received it 13 days ahead of time, but it was mailed more than 14 days ahead of time in the statutory time frame set forth. I don't know if, before you get started on the merits, if there's anyone who wanted to press that or not. I just want to put it on the record.
Anyone wishing to be heard on that issue of
We're going to ask a
timely
question
notice?
before we begin also, Mr. President. Could you tell me who else received notice? There were what? How many butters? Let me just say, how many butters are there?
5. Well, 4 including the applicant. Stonebridge Fire District, the Town of Tiverton, Tiverton Power, Inc., Douglas Industries, and John W. Douglas Jr.
Thank you.
And just for the record, this was mailed out of Town Hall, picked up by the mail carrier on Friday, May 22nd, and stamped by the postmaster on Saturday, May 23rd.
Yeah, Mr. Tights, we did speak before, and although the statute says at least 14 days, we believe it was sent within that time period, but because they say the word at least, there was very little time. We didn't get this within that 14-day period. We only had 13 days to respond to this, and it went over the Memorial Day weekend. It was very difficult for us to respond. We think something of this import would have to give us at least more time to respond, but we really didn't have the full 14 days. Mr. Felice also was.
Yeah, and if I might just add to that, that the town clerk received the matter was referred to the town clerk on the 19th, and the round stamp on the manifest at the post office was dated that Saturday. And it was too late for the registered mail to be scanned in. It was not scanned in, according to the post office and their records, until the following Tuesday after the holiday. And our group was out in the state of Washington at the time, so when we came back Wednesday, we had, that's when we received that information. It actually got delivered, let's see, Tuesday, late Tuesday, to our facility after the holiday. What we would ask for in the future on any matters like this, that if at least 14 days notice, we would appreciate. And it appeared from what we were looking at that if the clerk received it on the 19th, attention should have been to either get it on the 19th or that following day, the 20th, and we would have had it in plenty of time that week. Thank you.
Thank you. Your opinion is we've met the legal requirements of notification?
Yes.
We'll continue with the public hearing. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to be heard on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The applicant wishes to be heard.
Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Richard Sherman. I'm counsel for Tiverton Power. I wanted to speak very briefly with respect to the purpose of the amendment that is before you. The purpose of this amendment is a change in the zoning map, which by itself will not authorize the construction or operation of the proposed additional electric generating facility, but will allow the applicant to file applications to the Zoning Board of Review and the Planning Board for the construction and operation of the facility. The proposed change in the zoning map is limited to approximately 13.5 acres on land owned by the applicant. The location of the new district, zoning district lines as reflected in the application is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan for use of land in the Tiverton Industrial Park for industrial and commercial purposes. The location of the new district lines as set forth in the application is also consistent with the presence and the location of the existing Algonquin Gas Transmission Company easement. No change is sought with respect to the present location of the Stafford Pond Watershed Overlay Protection District line as shown in the town records. The location of the new zoning district lines as set forth in the application will still allow for the continuation of open space and residential R60 zoning adjacent to Stafford Pond, which is again consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. Finally, the Planning Board has recommended approval of the proposed amendment to the zoning map, which is before you this evening. I would like to point out on the easel, Mr. Chairman, this is a drawing, a blown-up drawing, which is a smaller copy, which is in the application, that shows the area that is hatched, which we are seeking to have rezoned in accordance with the provisions of the application. The existing zoning line is here to the west. The proposed zoning line is here to the east, and it would run basically along the eastern boundary of the existing Algonquin transmission line easement from this point down to this point where there's an intersection with lot 77 owned by the Stonebridge Fire District, and then along the line of lot 71 to lot 69D. Both 71 and 69D are owned by the applicant. So what we're talking about is a proposal to rezone this area from R60 and open space respectively to industrial. With your permission, I would like to have two representatives of Tiverton Power speak to you with respect to the application. They will be brief, as we will try to be brief and give you a summary of our proposal, and also then be in a position to answer any questions that you or any member of the public may have. The first person that I'd like to have speak is Michael Layton, who is the CEO of Brick Power Holdings. Mr. Layton.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Michael Layton, and I am CEO of Brick Power Holdings, which is the entity which owns the Tiverton Power project. We are here tonight for consideration by the council for our application for a change in the zoning map that would allow us to apply for various town licenses and permits for the proposed project. But I would also like to provide you with some background information concerning Brick Power Holdings and its wholly owned subsidiary, Tiverton Power. Brick Power is a small group of investors who purchased the existing Tiverton Power facility out of a bankruptcy a few years ago. Prior to the purchase, the plant was shut down for some period of time. A lot of media attention was focused in the mid-'90s on a restructuring of the power market in New England. the electric generating business, with the state legislators, including Rhode Island, approved laws to make these changes. What these changes effectively did was require the regulated utilities to divest themselves of the generating assets that they owned. And these assets were then purchased by what's commonly referred to as non-utility generators. And this created a competitive market in New England for electricity. This competitive environment and the non-utility generators that participate are private owners who provide power on a competitive basis and must deliver power at an economic price and be reliable when they're called on to deliver the electricity. Otherwise, like any other business, they stand to go out of business, which was the case, as I mentioned previously, for the Tiverton power plant. Consumers are benefiting by the competitive market in general as a result of lower power prices. But again, the power plant operators must provide power on a timely economic basis. Since Brick Power acquired Tiverton, the existing plant has maintained an excellent operating record and also an excellent profile in regard to environmental and safety issues. It is an award-winning plant as it applies to both safety and environment. The plant has achieved what is known as STAR status by OSHA under its voluntary protection program, and this translates into 0 recordable incidents of safety violations under OSHA. This has been the case for the years 2005, 6, 7, and 8. As well as, in addition to that, there have been no notices of any environmental violations at the plant during that same period of time. Tiverton Power is a good neighbor, and we remain committed to being a good neighbor. For example, we have announced our commitment as part of the proposed project to install a sewer line connection to the facility that would be large enough to accommodate expected sewer discharges from a fully built-out Tiverton Industrial Park. This kind of infrastructure improvement should prove very beneficial to the town in connection with the full utilization of the industrial park. With your permission, I would like to introduce now Jason Moore, the project manager, who will briefly explain the proposed project so that you'll have a bit more background information on the proposed project. Thank you for your time. Here's Jason.
Mr. President, councilors, my name is Jason Moore. I'm here on behalf of Tiverton Power. I'd like to take you through some slides we have, take you through the project. The expansion project at Tiverton Power is a 300 megawatt expansion to the existing facility. The new facility is essentially the same as the existing facility, which consists of a single industrial gas turbine in what's called combined cycle with a steam turbine. So there are 2 electric generators at the existing facility. There'll be 2 new electrical generators at an expanded facility. The layout and construction of the new facility is essentially the same as the existing facility with 2 significant changes. Those 2 changes, well, first let me discuss the similarities. Like I said, the gas turbines are the same. The heat recovery generators are the same. The steam turbine is slightly increased due to a larger expected output from a steam turbine generator. And essentially, the construction of the new project would be a mirror image of the existing project. The 2 significant changes are the addition of what's called a duct burner. The duct burner allows for an increased capacity of the steam turbine, primarily used in the summertime months. In the summertime months, the ambient conditions, when it's hot out, naturally cause the gas turbine to lose its capacity and it produces less power. So the addition of a duct burner allows for the increased power in the summertime months, typically of that steam turbine, allows for the same amount of power output in the summer as in the winter months. The duct burner essentially puts natural gas into the heat recovery steam generator and essentially boosts the steam output for the steam turbine. The second significant change would be the addition of a dual fuel capability. And the dual fuel capability is essentially used in the cold winter months. In those cold winter months, Natural gas is oftentimes curtailed for large industrial users, with deference being made to the residential customers. So in those cold winter months, a plant like Tiverton could find its gas being shut off so that there's enough available gas for the residents. So the addition of a dual fuel capability, which would allow the expanded facility to operate for a limited period of time per year on a distillate fuel oil, and in this case, an ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel oil, would allow for the Tiverton expansion generator to run in those cold months and supply reliable power to the electric grid. This capability is considered as a critical capability in today's markets by the independent system operator, ISO New England. And it would be a decent asset for this area where a large number of generators are only available to run on natural gas only. So in those winter months, when gas is at a disadvantage and not available, we would still be able to run. Those are the two major differences. Other than that, it's essentially the same plant. I can take you through one of the presentations we have and show you the layout of the new plant. This is the site layout of the existing plant. The lines in dark make up the new plant. The lines in a lesser hidden font show the existing plant. The main building, main generation building is here. What's called an air-cooled condenser, which allows for the condensing of the steam once it's passed through a steam turbine is here. On the new plant, we have a similar size, slightly smaller generation building to the east, with a slightly larger air-cooled condenser also to the east. It's essentially a mirror image. The air-cooled condenser is larger to accommodate the larger steam turbine, which, as I mentioned before, was increased in size for the addition of the duct burners to allow for summertime capacity. An air-cooled condenser, which is on the existing unit, also on the new unit, is critical to keep the water consumption of the plant low. Similar plants have different types of condensers that will use a lot more water too. So we've continued our reliance on the air-cooled condenser. Obviously takes up more land, but allows a lot less usage of the water.
Excuse me, Mr. Moore, may I ask you a question?
Certainly.
What is the height on that condenser?
The 102 feet.
And what's the height on the existing one?
Which is the same height? Yeah, the two air-cooled condensers are essentially the same. The new air-cooled condenser has not been spec'd out yet. We're not at the point of ordering equipment, but it's very likely to be the same manufacturer and the same height, the same design and build. Additional structures besides the generation building and the air-cooled condenser, which are the larger pieces, are two new tanks, a raw water storage tank, which will also be used for fire protection and reserve fire water. A demineralized water tank for the storage of demineralized water for the steam system. A fuel oil tank for the ultra-low sulfur diesel, which will be used for the dual fuel capability. And I do have another attachment or another presentation I'll flip to in a few minutes, and I'll show you some more details about the fuel oil storage tank. There would be a new switch yard, similar to the existing switch yard, built on the Tiverton property. And the other major structure would be the addition of a new substation, still on the Tiverton property, but outside of the fence line of the existing plant. And this new substation would be built by Tiverton Power and then handed over to National Grid. And National Grid would use this substation to control their powers going north and south and through the new combined plant. Some questions were raised in the planning committee on the location and the use of ultra-low sulfur diesel on the facility. In this slide, you can see the fuel oil tank located to the south of the plant. It has a secondary containment for 110% of the volume, so there will be double containment for the fuel oil. We have spent a lot of time analyzing the location, the best location of this tank on the property, and this presentation will show you two critical lines, or two critical pieces of information. The first is this green line, which is the high points of the property. So essentially, everything to the west of this line is a down gradient from the Stafford Pond to the west of the line. Everything to the east of this line is down gradient to Stafford Pond. So you can see this line is to the east of the proposed new ultra-low sulfur diesel tank. So in this case, if there was a leak of the tank into the secondary containment, and if there was a leak of that, any leakage would flow away from the Stafford Pond, which was a concern raised in the planning committee. Also, there are arrows on this presentation that show the direction of groundwater flow, and we did confirm that the groundwater flow in this location is away from Stafford Pond. So in the worst case scenario, if there was a double breach of containment, the fuel oil would flow downhill and away from Stafford Pond. Other considerations that were made on the location of this tank were made by our facility engineers and designers essentially for safety and for operational concerns. Basically, the best location for offloading of fuel and for operations by the plant personnel. So we wanted this slide to be here, and I believe we have it in your attachments to help address some of the questions raised by the planning board.
Existing ACCs about the new ACCs.
90 versus 80.
102.
Okay.
90 to 102.
Yeah. Thanks. 92 to 102. I'm sorry, correction on the ACC is about 10 feet higher. Thank you, Chris. Before I ask if there's any questions, just a few other points here. There are some auxiliary buildings, the gas compressor buildings. We take gas off the Algonquin gas line. These three buildings are gas compressor building, a metering building, electric building. Those three buildings do exist currently today on the property. Those three buildings would be moved because they interfere with the proposed new facility. They'll be moved to the north and to the east. And also, as far as the Algonquin transmission line, we would be using there's two connections now to the plant. For the new expanded plant, there would be a new connection main to one of the existing lines. And the existing right-of-way for interconnection would also be used for interconnecting the plant to the grid. There would be some upgrades to the interconnection, but no significant changes to the right-of-ways would be necessary. So essentially, the same corridor would be used with some minor changes by National Grid at the point that they go to improve those lines. So essentially, that's my description of the plant. I'd like to ask if there's any questions.
Let me just, I just want to say that concludes the brief presentation to the council, because we wanted to give you an overview of this proposed project. Even though this is a zoning map change, we wanted to be in the position to give you some background information, to give you an overview, and we're also more than willing to try to answer any questions that you or any member of the public may have. But that concludes our formal presentation. Thank you.
Mr. President, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for you. I think I heard you say that all of the land involved in this proposal is now owned by the Tiverton power people. Is that correct?
That is correct. Lot 69D and Lot 71, which are referred to in the application, are both owned by Tiverton Power. There is no land involved with the requested change to the zoning map that is not owned by Tiverton Power.
Mr. President, I have one question. On the, what was referred to as the duct burner, if I understand correctly, the duct burner would be the equivalent of an afterburner on a jet engine, roughly speaking. So, very roughly speaking, but the question is there any impact on potential stacked emissions when you use the duct burner?
Okay, I'll try to not use my engineering speak and get too detailed, but I guess the kind of comparison is somewhat holds true. Essentially, the duct burner injects gas into the heat recovery steam generator after the gas turbine. It increases the energy in the heat recovery steam generator to produce more steam. For the emissions question, I would like to defer to my colleague, Chris Ryan from ESS.
The stack emissions will be...
Identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Chris Ryan, ESS Group, with the environmental consultant for Tiverton Power. The stack emissions for this project will be regulated just as they were for the original Tiverton 1 project by both Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management and US EPA. And even though some additional fuel will be burned in the duct burners and therefore contribute some additional emissions to the stack, those emissions will be controlled and will meet all the air emission standards that are required. So there'll be some additional fuel burn, but those emissions will be controlled just like the emissions from the gas turbine are controlled. And there are standards for best available control technology and lowest achievable emission rates that we will be required to demonstrate in our air permit application to Rhode Island DEM. So the short answer is, while some additional fuel is burned and some additional emissions are generated, they're controlled, and the impacts of those emissions have been modeled. Actually, we've just finished our air modeling, and the impacts from the facility will be insignificant, meaning that according to federal definitions, an insignificant impact cannot cause or contribute to any violation of air quality standards.
Thank you.
I have several questions with regard to how much fuel will be stored. How large is the fuel tank?
The fuel tank that's proposed for the facility is approximately at this point 880,000 gallons.
880,000?
Yes.
That would heat a few homes.
The question I have is, how would that fuel oil be transferred? Oh, I'm sorry, Louise.
It's all right, no, I have a few.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How will that fuel oil be transported to the site?
It would be transported in over-the-road tanker trucks, similar to the ones that fill the gas stations that you see on the street corner. So at this point, we have not, of course, selected any vendors or anybody to supply the fuel. So the original origin is not known at this point, but they would come via standard over-the-road tanker truck.
And the frequency on that?
The frequency is highly dependent on the use. The use of fuel oil is typically only used in very cold winter months, typically January, February, although in the case of an issue with the gas supply system, which has been known to happen from time to time, there could be a curtailment of gas some other time during the year if there's a problem upstream with the gas system. So in that case, really there would not be any delivery of fuel unless the fuel oil is being used. And when the fuel oil is being used, it would be essentially a regular delivery of trucks, probably maybe three trucks an hour, is that fair to say? Roughly, yeah.
With regard to daily use, when you're at optimum use of the fuel oil, how many gallons would you use in the course of a day?
The tank as designed is large enough for essentially 3.5 days of operation without being refilled. So as far as the gallons per day, I don't have those numbers at the tip of
So
my tongue.
roughly you use 300,000 gallons a day?
250.
Yes. Yeah, I guess simply divided by 3. So of course, yeah. As my colleagues have reminded me, there is a very tight limitation on the amount of fuel oil burning we're allowed to do per year. So essentially, the plant can't be run on distillate fuel the entire year. It's Chris, the 1,500 hours total per year. So it's really only something that's used when the gas is not available.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, you sure may.
I believe it was you, sir, that made a comment that the state of Rhode Island adopted legislation which separated the generators of electricity from those that distribute it, and that this created competition for which the state residents have benefited. I would say during that period of time, my electric bill went from 3 cents a kilowatt hour to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. I'd like to know how I benefited or where that information came from.
Well, there's been numerous studies made about the cost of electricity in competitive markets. And if you take out the fuel component, which is going to be passed through by your electric utility if they still own the generating equipment, or passed through the market mechanism, which is the current situation for the energy side of your electric bill. If you take that out, including the inflation factor, I think you'll find that you actually are doing better than you would have done otherwise. That has been the case in this market, in ISO New England, and in every other competitive market that's been studied.
I accept that explanation.
The duck burner, can we just talk about that a little bit? What is the impact on noise in the area to the abutters?
The duct burners are located in the heat recovery steam generator, which is all located inside of the generation building. At similar plants, there's anticipated to be no existing or additional noise from the duct burners to the overall plant. It's a relatively minor contributor of noise.
When will you fire?
Excuse me, I'm going to have him speak to the mic so other
Yes.
people can hear.
So
I'm
everybody
sorry.
can hear him.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Would you like me to repeat the last answer?
I think probably you should.
Essentially, the duct burner is no appreciable addition of noise to the plant.
When will you be, I realize this is a zoning amendment hearing, but when will you be filing your application before the Energy Facility Siting Board?
Our progress is well advanced for the filing. We hope to complete and make our application to the Energy Facility Siting Board in hopefully in July.
In July. One of the provisions of the EFSB allows the town to request funding from the applicant to perform studies of the local environmental effects of the proposed facility. I assume that you would be receptive to such an application and cooperate with the town.
I can assure you it would not be rejected out of hand.
That's a little bit different, I think, Mr. Chairman.
We would accept, of course, we would accept any reasonable application from the town. We intend to cooperate with the town through the licensing and permitting of this facility, absolutely.
Well, that would be, we should note that answer for the record because it may be something that the Stonebridge Fire District has raised some issues with regard to this, and that might be a vehicle to address those issues.
That's fine. We'd be glad to comply with your request.
Mr. President, we've heard from all the people who are in favor of the proposal that's being entertained by the town council. Is there anybody in opposition to this?
Well, the public hearing is still open, and anybody in the audience has a right to ask questions or speak about this. This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone else wishing to be heard on this matter.
Just very briefly, I think you're all aware of this. I'm Patricia Sullivan, a member of the Tiverton Conservation Commission. Mr. Mamatowski, our chair, is not able to be here this evening. We also have received a copy of the letter that the Stonebridge Fire District has given to council, and I'm assuming to members of Tiverton Power. since Tiverton Power began in Tiverton a number of years ago, when they first came to us, Conservation worked very closely with them in terms of the kind of plant they were going to build and so on. I must say, we have been very pleased from the environmental point of view in terms of everything that they have done in town this far. And the only concern that we would have at this point is the concern that's expressed by the Stonebridge Fire District. We have to be absolutely certain that the watershed of Stafford Pond and the pond itself is not in any way interfered with by the oil aspect of this. I don't understand all the specifics, nor did I hear every single word that was said, but I would just like to make that comment on behalf of Conservation, that we do have to protect in every possible way the watershed and the pond. Thanks.
Have you gentlemen received a copy of that letter from Tiverton Water? Stonebridge.
All of the questions raised by the Stonebridge have been answered. There's no danger to the water supply.
We have not received a copy of that letter.
Okay. The Administrative Board of Stonebridge Fire District has several concerns regarding the above-referenced amendment to the Tiverton zoning map, lot 69D and 71, within the watershed of Stafford Pond. The primary public public source of potable water for the town of Tiverton. The construction and operation of an oil-fired power plant could pose a serious threat to that water supply. Specific concerns include how often will tanker trucks transport oil through the watershed to the storage tank, where and in what quantity will oil be stored, how will oil be piped from the storage tank to the power plant. All of these operations involve the potential for human error and accidental oil spills. With safety and spill prevention features and procedures will be in place before operation. While the Administrative Board at this time has not formally expressed its opposition to this amendment, it does respectively request answers to these questions before this amendment is considered for approval. Stafford Pond is the sole source of drinking water for thousands of Tiverton residents, and all reasonable measures must be taken to protect its long-term viability.
Mr. Chairman, I think that to the extent that we haven't answered the issues raised in the letter, we're prepared to respond to them now. If I could get a copy of the letter so that I could identify what those issues are. Thank you very much. We will. Mr. Chairman, we'll try to respond to those issues if I may here. First of all, I believe that Mr. Moore explained with reference to the drawing entitled Hydrology, the proposed location of the oil storage tank and secondary containment relative to the surface contour divide and the groundwater flow direction. Secondly, I think we answered the question, how often will tanker trucks transport oil through the watershed to the storage tank? Well, I'm not sure that the tanker trucks will be going through the watershed because they will be approaching the facility from the west and not from the east. And I don't think that there will be any activity involving the transport, storage, or use of oil within the Stafford Pond watershed. Where and in what quantity will the oil be stored? I believe we answered that question. How will oil be piped from the storage tank to the power plant? I think Mr. Moore can answer that question now.
I wonder if you could use the microphone.
Sure. I refer back to the hydrological presentation we have. One of the considerations in the location of the storage tank, in addition to previously noted being down gradient and downflow of the watershed district and being outside of the watershed boundary, was its location to the existing plant, being in relative proximity to its intended use point. Piping to and from the plant, there'd be two pipes, would be all double wall pipes. So essentially, just like the oil tank, the piping would be a pipe within a pipe with interstitial monitoring, which is sensors that would determine if there was any leakage from one pipe to the second pipe. So the relatively short span of any piping, underground piping to go underneath the existing Tiverton roads, would be double walled. Those double walls would have a low point, and those low points would have leak detectors there to determine if any fluid is in those pipes. And if any fluid, of course, was determined to be there, the system would be shut down and those pipes would be cleaned. In addition, I'll add that for delivery of fuel oil to the tank, there will be an offloading containment area where trucks will be able to park, and any leakage from a tank, including up to 110% of a tank volume, if any leakage happened while unloading, because of course there's hoses involved, any error on unloading a tanker truck would flow into a containment area which is designed for 110% of the truck, and that would be contained and would be able to be removed. So I think that answers the question. Once again, double-walled piping with monitors from tank to facility, and then unloading capability to catch any leaks.
There's, I believe, one other question in the letter that we'd like to respond to. It's the last question in the first paragraph, which says, what safety and spill prevention features and procedures will be in place before operation? I think that Mr. Moore has described the design and the engineering of the proposed tank offloading area and containment, and also the tank itself and secondary containment, and the proposed piping from the tank to the turbine hull. I'd like to ask Mr. Ryan to speak to you with respect to SPCC plans, which are required as a matter of federal law with regard to the storage of fuel oil and petroleum products on site, and I think that his answer may address the question of what procedures are required to be in place with respect to trying to prevent spills, and also, if a spill occurs, how it is to be dealt with.
Thank you. First off, the storage facilities will have to comply with the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management's regulations for oil storage, and for any above-ground oil storage over 500 gallons, these regulations apply. So we have reviewed the regulations. We are fully familiar with the requirements of those regulations, and Tiverton Power would design its storage facilities in accordance with them. Secondly, as Mr. Sherman was discussing, oil storage of this nature requires that a spill control countermeasure plan needs to be prepared, or an SPCC plan. That plan will identify where all oil storage facilities are located. We'll have procedures and protocols for receiving oil, transporting oil, piping oil, burning oil, and also we'll discuss any emergency actions that need to be taken. Phone numbers for all environmental agencies that would need to be contacted if there were a spill will be included in the SPCC plan. And by preparing such a plan and training its employees in the use of that plan, any contingency for an oil spill on the site will be addressed.
I believe that answers the questions that were raised in the letter. If I'm incorrect, we'd be glad to respond to any other questions. Let me just point out one fact that I think is important for your consideration, and that has to do with the location of the proposed location of the oil tank. I'll try to speak up loudly. The proposed ground elevation, ground floor elevation of the tank, according to this plan, is at elevation 254.
The reason we're asking you to use the microphone, we have some people who use a hearing device, so if you can take that with you over to the microphone so that they can...
Can you hear all right?
I can't, but I can follow generally what you're doing.
I'll hold this way.
Let me try this, because I want to explain this as clearly as I can. The oil would be stored at elevation 254 feet. The top of the divide, surface divide, which divides the Stafford Pond watershed protection area to the east from the land to the west, is at this location 280. So there is a significant physical topographical difference between the top of that slope and where the tank is located. I just want to make sure that you're aware of it, in addition to the fact that the proposed location of the storage tank is outside of the watershed protection district.
Is that divide natural, or did the
That-
company build it?
No, that divide is based on existing contours that are there at this point. They have not been altered, they have not been altered in any way. They're based on topographical contour lines from USGS maps.
You mentioned, Richard, that you have done hydrology reports, studies. When were they done and who did them?
The groundwater elevation data, which is represented on the drawing that I have described, is based on a geotechnical study that was done in connection with the licensing of the first plant back in the mid-1990s. I believe that is correct, 97. That's taken that data. We have not done any additional borings, and that's been represented as such. We do not believe that there is any difference or change in the groundwater flow direction, but it's likely that we will go out and part of the licensing process, put some monitoring wells in to confirm that there has been, in fact, no change in the groundwater flow direction. But it is based on data from 1997.
And you see that as part of the EFSB hearing?
I see it as part of three hearings. One is the FSB. The second is the hearing before the Zoning Board of Review on a special use permit. And the third is the hearing before the Planning Board on Planning Board approval under the development plan regulations, which are required in connection with a zoning hearing.
That's all well and good, but we do not have the environmental consultants on staff, either at the Zoning Board of Review or on the Planning Board, so we would have to look to the EFSB hearing. Is that a fair statement?
At a minimum, yes. Yes. You would also have the right, as I understand the Energy Facility Siting Act, to seek some financial assistance on behalf of the town to conduct whatever studies and analysis the town feels appropriate in connection with the licensing process, and that the applicant would be required, as a matter of law, to comply with your request.
And I think we've settled that you will be cooperative on what we put in there.
Yes, we will be cooperative.
Did you need to make a $1 million, $2 million deposit, please?
Anyone else wishing to be heard?
Laura Epke Neck Road. I think you just said it, sir, but I just wanted to make sure. The Stafford Pond Watershed Overlay District, in the backup document on the application, on the bottom of page 2 in the last paragraph, must be noted here that the applicant is not seeking any change to the location of the line which runs through Lot 69D and Lot 71 is currently configured, that represents the western boundary of the Watershed Protection Overlay District for Stafford Pond, see Exhibit B. And the Exhibit B that I have, I can't seem to find where that boundary is. Is it this?
No, if I may allow. This is actually Exhibit A, and Exhibit, let's see.
Perhaps if you could just hold up that map and show that the green line is there. My question gets to, is there any portion of land within the Watershed Protection Overlay District that is being asked to be changed to industrial?
Yes, I'll try to answer your
Okay.
question. First of all, if I
Let's
may.
do it to the camera.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a public hearing.
No, I understand that. I want to be able to speak
Okay.
into the microphone. The watershed protection district line that is shown on town drawings is this line right here. All right?
Okay.
This line right here.
Can you show us the line, please?
This line right here. That's on Exhibit B. as part of the application, I believe, because that is there. Do you see it's a straight line?
This one here.
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer to your specific question is any of the land within the watershed protection district part of the zoning map change? And the answer is yes. Let me explain what that is. This is a blow-up drawing of a drawing which is attached to the application that shows the area that is proposed to be rezoned. To change the zoning line from this line here to this line here. The watershed protection district line runs basically like this through a portion of lot 69D and lot 71.
So it kind of bisects this triangle.
Well, not exactly, but it divides it. The point is that the proposed, under the proposed site plan for Unit 2, this is the watershed protection district line. This is the watershed protection district line. The only portion of the project that is proposed to be constructed inside the district are two things. A gas metering building in connection with taking gas from the pipeline, which is here, to the plant, and a portion of a stormwater detention basin here. Everything else that's proposed is proposed to be west of that line and therefore outside of the district. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you. That answers my question. I don't know, thank you, what the rules are that surround that, but I don't, is it kosher to have an industrial zone in a watershed protection overlay? I guess if it is, you'll answer that. My second question is, I think I just heard an answer to it. Tonight is for the zoning change. When will the public have a chance to be heard on the proposed oil burning portion of the plant? Is that at a zoning variance? Is that at the other state hearing that you were mentioning, Ms. Durfee?
Well, I do know, or as I recall, under the EFSB, that they do have to hold public hearings in the town where the facility.
I can respond to that
Go ahead.
procedurally if you wish.
That's fine.
If the zoning map change is approved, that would allow the applicant to file three basic applications. There are other permit applications, but three basic applications. One would be the application to the Energy Facility Siting Board. The second would be an application to the Town Zoning Board of Review for a special use permit. And the third would be applications to the Planning Board for a proposed subdivision and in connection with this project and development plan review. The Energy Facility Siting Board is required as a matter of law to hold at least one hearing on any application in the town in which the project is proposed to be located. In addition, the applicant would be required to apply for and participate and attend public hearings required under the town zoning ordinance for any application for a special use permit or any planning board approval.
Okay, so just to
Mr.
clarify.
Bowen, may I respond to that as well?
Yes.
I think the answer to your question is all of the above. We're here tonight on just the zone change, but this is the first step in the process, and it's a public hearing. And the applicants have brought forward this plan as the rationale for the zone change. So if you have concerns about elements of it, it should be raised tonight as well as at possible future hearings. Because if the council denies the zone change, then it won't go any further to any future hearings. So this is a public hearing. One should raise any concerns that you have at this hearing.
Well, I guess my concern is that, you know, a published zoning change, I think a lot of people in town may, my guess is, are not aware of this secondary portion to the project of the oil burning piece of it. And that, by approving a zoning change, the council would not necessarily be approving, giving the green light to build that portion of the expansion, correct?
No, the council would just be giving the green light to apply.
Proceed on the
For
process.
the next
Okay.
steps in public hearing.
Okay.
But, Mr. President, if I may ask a follow-up, Ms. Epke asked an earlier question of the solicitor, is it correct to have industrial zoning within the watershed area?
I think that's a question that I can't answer with a yes or no, or my usual yes and no answer. It is an individual situation. There isn't anything that says you can never have industrial in a watershed. I think it has to be looked at the individual circumstances, and that's where you'd be looking at those other issues, such as the environmental issues in the study. And one aspect of it has been the review by the planning board. Another aspect has been the testimony before you, but you may feel you don't have enough information before you on that, and which could lead to you either continuing it if there's more information you want on that, on the environmental aspect on the watershed, and or even denying it if you don't feel it's consistent. So it's really a policy question based on the individual situation.
But looking at it from one perspective, there's nothing that says you cannot have industrial within the watershed area.
There's nothing that prohibits an industrial zone within the watershed.
So then the next step is, does it make sense to allow the special use of, I'm probably treading on incorrect terminology, but the next step would be, does it make sense to allow the special use within the watershed area?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing to prevent the applicant from filing an application when you're ready with the EFSB.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
My question is, there is nothing to prevent the applicant from filing a application with the Energy Facilities Siting Board tomorrow, day after tomorrow.
Well,
I mean, assuming your application is complete, ready to go.
if the zoning map change is granted, the answer to the question is yes. If the zoning map change is not granted, the answer to the question is no, and that is because a portion of Unit 2 is proposed to be built on land that is not zoned industrial.
Could be done concurrently, though.
Well,
there's nothing in the act that I have read, unless you point me to a provision that you can cite to me that would prevent you from going forward with the EFSB.
it is always, I have had, over the years, some experience with the Energy Facility Siting Act and with applications for energy facility, generating facilities. It has been my understanding and my analysis of the act that because a change to the zoning map is a political act by town council, as opposed to a zoning board of review decision or a planning board decision, that it is essentially a political act of the town council and is outside the jurisdiction of the EFSB. Therefore, the EFSB application, which we are in the process of preparing, is premised on the fact that a zoning map change would be granted. And if that change is granted, we would be in the position to file our application.
Right.
There is not enough room on the existing land that is zoned industrial to construct the proposed Unit 2, and that's why we are seeking the zoning map change.
But to answer my question is that may be the orderly way you want to proceed, but there's nothing to prevent you from filing it and operating concurrently, seeking permits, political or otherwise.
I suppose not. I've never done it. It didn't strike me as being a particularly efficient way to proceed, but I would suspect that it is possible that it could be done.
Does that also mean that if they get all of the permits and licenses in a year or two from now, after they've spent tens of thousands of dollars, they come back to us and we make the political decision that we're not going to grant the amendment? I tend to agree with counsel, it's a little bit more
No, I
orderly to
don't- I
take
don't-
this step by step. I didn't,
That's taking it to the extreme.
well, it could go to that extreme.
Not likely.
May I ask that if all proceeds positively, when you would be building this new facility?
I think Mr. Zoin can respond to that.
The timing of the building of the plant is we're going to do the best we can to time the construction and operation of the second unit with the needs in the ISO New England market. There's a lot of dynamics involved in that, especially now with the economic recession. That's had an impact on loads, on demand for electricity, just like demand in every other aspect of the economy has slid off, so has electricity demand. So there's not an immediate need for additional capacity in the market. We expect to come out of that recession. We're all hoping we come out of it quickly, of course. Additionally, with some of the greenhouse gas emissions control regulations that have already taken effect in this region and are about to take effect federally, I think you've read about cap and trade and some of these programs that are proposed in the U.S. Congress. We believe that when effectively the cost of carbon, I'll call it, of those regulations, it impacts I'll call them dirtier generators, maybe some of the older plants that don't have emissions controls, aren't as efficient, or burning coal, which, isn't exactly, the right kind of carbon footprint. When some of those plants have to pay those cost of emissions credits that are going to be required under the existing regional regulations and the coming federal regulations, we believe some plants will be retired. Some dirtier plants will be retired. The combination of the upswing in demand, what we think is going to be ultimately some retirements of older, dirtier plants, will be our signal to, we're going to have to forecast that because you can't build a plant overnight and plop it down. It takes generally 2 years to build, approximately 1 year to complete the overall development, including all the permits. So we'll back 3 years off of our best forecast for those events to happen. And that will be, when we build the plant. So right now, my best estimate is in the 14-15 timeframe. That's where we're here now. We have to plan for it, do all the things we need to do to get a construction contract, and of course, build the plant, test it, and put it into service.
You're saying 2014 or 2015, in that area, you expect that you might be building?
Rough range right now. I mean, and that's based on forecasts that are ever changing, so I don't want to be held to that absolutely, but that's a good range to go with.
And let me explain why I asked that. First of all, I think the town is interested in getting additional taxpayers into the town. I'm sure that would have an effect also on your construction. I'm prepared to make a motion, and this doesn't necessarily end the debate, but I'm prepared to make a motion that your application for the zoning map change be approved, subject to a review and possible revocation of this approval, let's say in 5 years. 905 would be 2014. So that if construction is not...
Well, currently, Hannibal, the public hearing is still open, and it's not time to...
Sorry, so construction wouldn't be, if construction didn't start by that time, you're saying?
Then the authority that we're granting...
So you're putting a sunset on it, essentially?
Yeah. In other words, if you choose not to build, then we might prefer to see the land remain R60 and open space. Am I being making it too difficult?
The problem is, what that time frame is, what that sunset date is, because what happens, for example, if additional transmission of electricity is built that brings Canadian hydropower to the region and therefore puts off further the building of a gas plant. We're at a disadvantage versus hydro because the water doesn't cost any money.
Well, let me say this,
So-
I don't see any reason why you couldn't approach the town council in 2014 or 2015, whichever the council chooses.
Hannibal, I think the discussion on a motion is premature until the public hearing is closed. So I don't think we're in a position now to be discussing possible motions until we close the public hearing and open the debate to the council.
Well, quite frankly, I think the making of a motion and a second generates more.
No, and during a public hearing, the public hearing has to be closed before we take up the debate to fashion a motion. Right now, the public hearing is still open, and there's not time to start discussing, options that we wish to offer to, on this proposal. No, I'm just saying, it will be in time after we close the public hearing, which we haven't done yet.
If I could, Mr. President, if I could ask a hypothetical of the president of the company, and I can ask the hypothetical not having to be as diplomatic as he when he's dealing with colleagues in the industry, but if I understand correctly, any influence that we could exert to close down Brayton Point would speed the construction of the second plant. Is that a reasonable hypothetical?
A hypothetical yes is the answer.
Thank you.
Ms. Epke?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Laura Epke, again, Neck Road. I did, as long as Mr. Tite said that we should raise concerns, Pandora's box. 880,000 gallons of fuel oil. Has the fire chief been asked what the impact on, or can I ask the fire chief?
You can,
Does he
yes,
know?
you can. This is a public hearing, and
What the impact on the fire department would be to prepare for that?
one hell of a ladder.
Good evening, Chief Lloyd, Tiverton Fire Department. Thank you, Ms. Epke. I was waiting my turn patiently. First, let me say, in my 5 years in Tiverton, Tiverton Power has been a very good neighbor. They've been very good with us. But I do have concerns. I have concerns that they have put forward, that they have a plan in place, that they're going to look at studies. We're going to have a double-walled tank. We'll have double-walled monitored piping. But I'll be honest, Mr. President, I don't get called when all those systems work. And anything that was to go wrong would definitely tax the Tiverton Fire Department to be able to handle it. And I would like, as Councilor Durfee has put forward, is that I would like to hear some type of an affirmative answer from them as to either training, equipment, or other types of things that are going to help us to respond to an incident. And their emergency action plan, I know that they do have us and the police department as their first responders, as well as outside agencies that are over 3 hours away. So Tiverton Fire, Tiverton Police will be the first responders to this agency, to any incident that occurs there. And I would like to hear some assurances that there would be a commitment from Tiverton Power to see that our first responders are properly equipped and trained to be able to handle emergencies at that facility. But I do have concerns about it, yes.
If I might address the question to the engineer, project engineer, and again, I guess I should retroactively apologize to my old engineering professors of many years ago. I'm speaking probably that would cause them to be extremely unhappy with me. But basically, if you had a 110% containment vessel around the tank, and you had a leak, and there were to be a fire, which would be quite a series of coincidences for all that to happen, fundamentally, it's going to burn. And it's going to burn within the containment area up until perhaps enough foam could be put on it to smother it. But what we're going to have is one heck of a plume of smoke, I would guess.
Yeah, in response to that, the proposed tank would be outfitted with a fixed AFFF foam firefighting system that would be able to be triggered and used to suppress a fire if one was to develop in the tank. The expansion project would also have a dedicated emergency diesel fire pump and a reserve of fire water in the raw water tank that would be dedicated for firefighting. And to answer the question of training, the folks at Tiverton Power are very proud of their relationship with the local emergency responders, the police department and fire department, and we would certainly plan and welcome both the police and fire department in, both during the commissioning process, before fuel was ever put into the tank, and at multiple times, especially at the beginning of the project, to be familiar with all aspects of the new facility, including the fuel oil tank, and we would certainly be receptive to their input and hope to work with them.
When you talk about having the capability of handling 110% of its capacity, is that in the outer section of this tank because it's a double-line tank, or is that in an outside facility should it rupture?
The way we are, we've currently drawn and foresee building this, it would be likely a steel ring containment, essentially a double wall. So if there was leakage from the primary tank, it would go into a secondary steel ring just outside of the existing tank.
Exactly. And if it should escape that, then it's onto the ground. There's no containment outside of that?
That's correct. It's two containments, one for the...
Okay, so if you got a center ring, then I don't know what the diameter of that tank is, and it's gonna, in the outer ring, it's gonna hold 110% of it, how much space is there between those two walls?
And it would be a volumetric calculation.
Okay, what's the height of that tank?
Chris, can you help me out with the height of the tank?
Let me check some notes.
Mr. Mullen, they would come under NFPA standards for this. It would be similar to what we have at Inland Fuel now.
That's what I'm gonna
There would
ask
be a
about anyway.
containment. You are correct. The standard is 110% containment of the liquid that is inside of it. But again, I'm not only talking just the fuel in this case. I'm also talking about the hydrogen they have on board, nitrogen they have down there.
I understand
There are
that. And
they're
also-
confined spaces, they're high angles.
In Inland and in Montauk and Somerset, their tanks were in berms. So there was an earthen berm around the outside of a tank, so that if the capacity was to leak out, it was gonna stay within a berm. You know, I mean, we still got the issues of ground contamination, but all of that containment in this tank is all to be done within the outer shell, and nothing to do surrounding the outside of the tank?
Typically, a berm system is the secondary containment. So on a fuel oil tank with a berm, it's typically a single wall tank, and if that tank leaks, the leakage would go into a berm area that's typically lined with a thick vinyl or synthetic. So essentially, you're leaking from a steel tank into a lined containment. What we are proposing is to have a complete secondary containment of steel on concrete, which would, if there's a leak from the original steel tank, it would then go into a secondary steel ring containment. And in my opinion, that's far superior to a liner, which is essentially thick vinyl that can be compromised much more easily than a thick steel.
Well, I'm always afraid that you have the ultimate, and the two containers rupture.
Well, Mr. Mullen, you're also correct, is the transportation to and from the site, and this traveling all the roads. I have concerns with us being able to
I think
keep.
we should have some concerns if we're talking about a plant that's gonna burn 250,000 gallons a day. And the average tanker probably holds, 8,000 gallons in a trailer, in a tank trailer?
Depends on the size of the tanker.
So what are we
10
talking?
to
We're talking
12.
30,000 trucks a day to bring us to?
No.
I mean, 3,000 trucks a day coming over, no, even 3,000 trucks a day coming over our streets. When you
You'd have
burn
30
that.
trucks, you'd have 30 trucks coming in a
Burn
day.
the entire tank.
No, that's if you burn a day. That's if you burn 250,000.
But
Not if you burn 880,000.
But again, the number of hours are going to be extremely limited. I think that typical interruptions of natural gas flow in the region and any other region that is susceptible to interruptions is minutes or hours at most. This is not something that we propose to do as a routine matter. First of all, it's very expensive to burn fuel oil. It's much more expensive than natural gas. And so it wouldn't be done by choice. Frankly, it would be done because of emergencies to fulfill our obligations. And secondly, again, the interruptions that have historically occurred and what we'd expect reasonably to occur in the future would again be momentary ones and perhaps an hour or two at most. That's the nature of the beast, but the independent system operator actually provides incentives for generators to provide backup fuel or secondary fuel, alternative fuel, because of just that situation. When there's a peak demand in the middle of the winter and there's no gas available to meet that demand, they want to be able to switch to oil for that short period of time so there's no loss of power. And the whole grid can be compromised as a result of not having the fuel to keep supply uninterrupted.
But you know, it's not so minimal. You know, just using your figures, 1,500 total hours, that comes to about 2 months in the course of the winter, if you're going to use it in the winter. That's not exactly occasional, following up on what Mr.
Right.
Baldwin just.
But the supply is based on the absolute maximum amount of hours we can burn the fuel. We never expect to get to that level. It's there for purposes of doing it, you know, and the fuel could be there for years before it degrades. It's not necessarily going to be refilled every year. The full amount of that tank is not necessarily going to be burned and refilled in a year's time. It could go on for several years without, you know, refill, or certainly complete refill. We have that, thousands of trucks rolling in.
But you're building an $880,000 tank, so.
Yes, that's what we'd like to do.
Again, Mr. Boland, I'd like to just reiterate, Tiverton Power, Tiverton Power has been a very good neighbor. They have been very good. But as fire chief, I really would want to hear a commitment from them for technical training, technical equipment, not just come visit our plant and take a look at it. Our responders are going to have to be there. Their staff is not going to be a large staff to handle any emergency. It will be our staff that will be there, even though they may have contracts with outside vendors. Tiverton Fire, Tiverton Police will have to respond to it. I do need to hear, I really would like to hear a commitment
I will
on
give
the
that-
record
I
from
will
it.
give that commitment unequivocally now, and that's part of what we anticipate doing with our additional plant personnel and the existing plant personnel. All the employees will be trained in whatever emergency measures need to be attended to, just as they are now with regard to certain chemicals and the handling of those chemicals. We would do the same with regard to the handling of the fuel oil, and work with the fire department, the police department, and any of the environmental agencies in training the people appropriately and certifying them if that's what's required.
Thank you.
Could you go over one point again? I'm trying to follow up on Ms. Durfee's point. I don't understand now why you need an 880,000 gallon tank. If you're only using it in that limited amount of time in an emergency that might last an hour or 2 hours, why would you need a tank with this capacity?
Yeah, essentially, the size of the tank is required due to the volume that the turbine consumes in oil. If there was a curtailment for, let's say, a week, if there was no gas or a cold snap.
I understand. Now we've gone from the hour to a week, so I mean, now I can understand the concept.
Yeah, but the point I was making is it doesn't necessarily occur, you know,
I understand.
consistently. You could have an hour today or 3 hours today, and tomorrow another 3 hours,
But just assuming you used it for a 24-hour period, how much fuel oil would you consume in that 24-hour period?
250,000 gallons, a third of the capacity.
Which would be roughly 30 tanker trucks, which is 1 an hour, 1.5 an hour. And I think we're starting to parse things a little too much, because remember, we have Route 24 that goes through town, and I've never done a traffic study, but I drive it virtually every day. And there are an awful lot of tank trucks hauling petroleum products, chemicals, industrial gases. I suspect that in any 24-hour period, there are more than 30 trucks with hazardous material goes through the middle of Tiverton right now.
What's the capacity of the tank that's out there now?
There is no fuel oil tank now.
There isn't?
There's no fuel.
You just have it for gas then?
It's just
at this
gas
point.
only, it's fired on gas only right now. There is no secondary, no backup fuel.
I know this is going to be a dumb question, but I'll try it. Why do you need a backup for having the second unit?
Because when the first unit was developed and built, the region was much less dependent on natural gas as a fuel for not only electricity production, but home heating. And so now the region is that much more dependent on natural gas. And so in the event, as I mentioned earlier, of some curtailment of natural gas, which is more, not only is it more likely because of the higher demand, but because of the results of any curtailment being more severe, the independent system operator and generally throughout the country, backup fuel is encouraged. And so what we're trying to do is be responsive to the reliability issue that the independent system operator has put forth and said, to whatever extent new plants can be built with dual fuel capability, we'd like to have that. We understand the sensitivities here, and we're trying to address them. We will continue to try to address them in a practical sense. But again, the dynamics have shifted dramatically away from oil as a primary fuel, especially for heating oil, for heating purposes, to natural gas, and electricity reduction is done similarly from oil and coal to natural gas.
You know, there's different standards for the two fuels in terms of your emissions. I think one of the reasons that the gas-generated plant that was built here in '97 was accepted as well as it was because it was such a clean-burning plant. Now, what's being introduced as the second unit is one that alternatively is going to burn oil. What does it do in terms of the environment? I mean, right now, what comes out of your stacks is basically steam. The scrubbers do a wonderful job, and we don't have any issues. But if we start burning oil at that plant, you're not held to the same standard.
Well, perhaps I can address that. First off, I think everybody needs to remember that when it comes for air quality standards, and I already discussed the permitting process earlier and the review process that DEM and EPA will impose on us as they review our permit application, we will have to provide confirmation that we have the best available control technology and, in case of some pollutants, the lowest achievable emission rate compared to any other similar type project that we have here. Importantly, when we talk about oil firing, and you've heard it a couple times here, it's going to be ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel. That is the lowest sulfur oil that is available for firing. It is nearly as clean as natural gas when it comes to to particulate emissions and sulfur dioxide emissions. Really, the emissions from a plant firing ultra-low sulfur diesel are nearly equivalent to those from gas fire, and the emissions will still be controlled the same way using selective catalytic reduction for NOx emission control. So they're really, air quality will be protected. And again, I might emphasize, we've already done dispersion modeling for the facility in preparation for our air permit applications and our siting board application. The impacts from the facility are going to be insignificant. They've already been modeled. We're completing the modeling report now. Insignificant impacts mean that there will be no change in the air quality in this region, in this area, from the burning of either fuel oil or gas from this facility. And so the clean fuel, proper dispersion, insignificant impacts.
Mr. Chairman, I think all of this discussion is very important, but all we're being asked to do is to approve a change to the zoning map. If we intend to deny it, then if we're not ready to do that now, we're never going to be ready. I would suggest we close the public hearing and proceed with the business at hand.
Anyone else from the public wishing to be heard? We'll close the public hearing when everyone's had a chance to speak.
Hi. Ed Adamowski, 4N Lane. We're on the east side of the pond. Had a couple of questions for the council, just to clarify.
Yes.
The new power plant location compared to the old one.
Trying to do this.
Yeah, they kept on getting the backside.
No, let me do it this way. The existing facility is located here in the lighter outlines.
Yep.
All right, the existing, it's the main power building, the air-cooled condensers, and the switchyard.
Okay.
The proposed second unit, or additional unit, is located next to it, to the east. That would, and basically parallel to it. That would be the powerhouse.
Yeah.
That would be the air-cooled condenser.
Yeah.
And the switchyard back here, and then a new substation.
Okay. The reason why I wanted to clarify that is that when we say it's next to the existing power plant, it's actually between the existing power plant and the pond. It's east of the existing structures. And presumably, I think you mentioned that it's upsloping at that point, right?
According to the contours, the existing slope,
Right.
what's called a topographical divide,
Yep.
is located in this, by this green line.
But these new structures will sit taller than these back structures.
The powerhouse building is roughly 80 feet in height. Chris?
102, the current one is 80,
No,
the
I'm
new one's
talking about-
102.
Well, just to
I'm
make
talking
the...
about the